Welcome to First Message. Pastor Hollie is our minister to children, youth, and family, but she's a wonderful minister to our whole community. And I hope her message today will lift your spirits.
Excellent word. What more can be said than to you God has said? To you for refuge, to Jesus have fled. Fear not, I am with thee. Oh, be not dismayed, for I am thy God, and will still give thee aid. I'll strengthen thee, help thee, and cause thee to stand, upheld by my righteous, omnipotent hand. When through the deep waters I call thee to go, the rivers of sorrow shall not overflow. For I will be with thee, thy troubles to bless, and sanctify to thee thy deepest distress. When through fiery trials thy pathway shall lie, my grace all sufficient shall be thy supply. The flame shall not hurt thee, I only design thy dross to consume, and thy gold to refine. I will not desert to its foes. That soul, though all hell should endeavor to shake, I'll never, no, never, no, never forsake. That soul, though all hell should endeavor to shake, I'll never, no,
Matthew 13 is full of parables and begins with this one, the parable of the sower. That same day, Jesus went out of the house and sat beside the sea. Such great crowds gathered around him that he got into a boat and he sat there while the whole crowd stood on the beach. And he told them many things in parables, saying, "Listen, a sower went out to sow, and as he sowed, some seeds fell on the path, and the birds came and ate them up. Other seeds fell on rocky ground, where they did not have much soil, and they sprang up quickly. Then they had no depth of soil, and when the sun rose, they were scorched, so that since they had no root, they withered away. Other seeds fell among thorns, and the thorns grew up and choked them. Other seeds fell on good soil and brought forth grain, some 100-fold, some 60, some 30. Listen, anyone with ears, listen." Well, many of us have heard this parable, and oftentimes we equate it with distinguishing between good versus bad. But parables are more than a moral lesson about good or bad behavior. They are about the deep mystery of who God is and are about helping us discover exactly what God is like. Through parables, we learn about what love is, what it means to work for justice, and a bit about how we fall short on all of these on our own. We can't oversimplify parables because by their very nature, they are not easy. They are not easily explained. They are not easily understood, and oftentimes they lead to more questions than answers. So, as we dig into this parable of the sower, with this idea that we are to hear this with our focus being on more about understanding the nature of God, listen to see what you hear. Well, when I read this, what I heard was wastefulness. Here we are. We have this sower out doing his job, and yet seeds are just falling everywhere. It reminds me of kids trying to carry a plate of food at a picnic. They load up their plate with all that stuff that they love. Then they try to carry it with their little hands over to where they're supposed to sit. And yet this heavy plate is overflowing with chips and watermelon. And as they walk, a chip falls here and a piece of fruit falls there. By the time they get to their seat, they are missing several pieces of food. But the dogs and squirrels and birds and other animals have surely enjoyed a nice meal by this point. Well, as the sower is out doing his duty for the day, he's being kind of wasteful and sloppy. First, seeds fall on the ground and birds just come and eat them up. He's going on and more seeds fall on some rocky areas, probably not where he was intending on planting, but the seeds quickly sprout and then they scorch. But never mind all that. The sower just keeps on going and more seeds fall, and then the thorns, and those don't make it. And of course, through all of this, by some chance, seeds fall on good soil and they grow and they flourish. Imagine a teenager doing a job that they don't really want to do. I understand this because we have lots of teenagers in our house. Well, they have a job that they don't want to do, and so they kind of haphazardly throw seeds wherever they land, not really worrying about how many seeds they're using up, where they are landing, or what will happen to them when they go where they're not supposed to be. But let's think about this for a minute. This parable has a deeper meaning. So what if the sower is God, and there's really no haphazard throwing of seeds happening at all, but instead it is purposeful. It's not wasteful. In fact, it's generous seed throwing. It's not about where they land, but instead about putting enough seeds out there that they are abundantly available wherever they land. And what if these seeds are love and grace? What if these seeds are compassion and joy? Imagine for a moment God as the sower, relentlessly scattering these seeds of grace and love, no matter what kind of soil it lands on, because it doesn't matter. And we are the soil. At any one time in our lives, we have been or could be any one of these landing places. Sometimes we are rocky, hard, and difficult. Sometimes we are prickly, fickle, and unwilling. Sometimes we are flat, barren, and easily swallowed up. And sometimes we are this rich soil ready to grow and flourish. But this only happens because of God's nature of being unconditionally loving, persistent, and extravagantly generous. I can't help but think that God likes to scatter these seeds to everyone and anyone. Imagine God as the sower of unrelenting grace. Dietrich Bonhoeffer, however, makes the distinction between cheap and costly grace with this unrelenting grace. He says cheap grace is the grace where I assume I can grow and mature all by myself. It implies being blessed but not responsible. It is acceptance without change, peace without justice, and love without sacrifice. We accept God only on our own terms, and keep our faith at arm's length. But I don't think that's the point of Jesus in this parable at all. Jesus wants us to understand unrelenting grace and unconditional love, both of which comes from God's very nature. A few years ago, during a week at church camp, there was this young girl that was very angry and hostile and sometimes even violent. Imagine, she's that rocky ground. She was prone to verbal and physical outbursts. And by the end of that week at camp, the adults were running out of ways to help her and to keep her from the other campers and keep them from lashing out at her. And then she signed up for the talent show at the end of the week. She got up to sing, and she began by saying, "I'd like to dedicate this song to my dad who died." Suddenly it clicked. The anger, the frustration all made sense. She was that rocky ground. She was grieving, and no one knew it. The beginning of the week might have been so much different if they had known what was going on, and they might have been able to help in a different way. Well, she got up and sang the most sincere and absolutely worst solo ever heard. It was off key, off pitch, off rhythm, off everything. It's almost as if I was actually the one singing it. Well, when she stopped, she just stood there at the front of the room with her head down, her eyes closed, clutching the microphone for dear life. Well, middle school kids can be cruel, but they weren't that night. That night, they gave this little girl who had hurled insults at them all week long a thunderous standing ovation. It lasted 3 minutes. I imagine often God feels much like those camp counselors and the kids, frustrated, disappointed, exhausted, not knowing what to do. But that doesn't stop the scattering of seeds. God keeps listening. God keeps sowing seeds with reckless abandon and wants so much more for us. Just like the kids and the counselors, as they cheered for this young girl, God keeps cheering for us, no matter whether we're rocky or thorny ground. That audience in that moment embodied the love of God and scattered seeds wherever they would fall. Whether we are hard ground or fertile soil, what matters is that God still tries to use us to plant seeds of hope, grace, and justice. What matters is that God remains faithful in the scattering of seeds and hopeful that there will be good soil for them to fall on. God remains active even when the thorny vines block our growth. God continues inviting even when the reception is hard and uninviting. Even when we are in the muck of the thorns, the seeds keep coming. Seeds that land on us, the rocky, the stark, the thorny, and even the fertile soil. And when those seeds take hold, we never know how we could be transformed. Amen.